I can't hear you now.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Now I can. Should I mute
Okay.
original audio or no?
Yeah, I think you don't need to mute the original audio, but if you're on the English channel, it should be fine.
Oh, okay. Well, it's good to be with you. Let's just go ahead and take the questions.
Okay, so the first question is from Ram Mohan. If you'd like to unmute yourself, Ram Mohan.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. I can see you too.
Okay, good.
So what? I'm watching you.
Good to see you. So my question is about Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila in the 16th chapter, Pundarika Vidyanidhi. He's visited, it says, the verse says he's visited at night by Krishna and Balaram. They slap him around the face. And the precursor to that is he makes an offense or he becomes hateful because he makes a judgment about the service that is being offered to Lord Jagannath. It was winter time, and Lord Jagannath is covered with a cloth, and whoever was doing the seva didn't wash the cloth first. They're supposed to wash the starch out of the cloth, and so I was like a bit dumbfounded by that. Like, why why are they slapping him around, basically?
Well, the idea there is that it was customary to, if you buy, for example, if you purchase some silk cloth, that before wearing it, you would wash the starch out of it or some measure of the starch out of it. Would be the custom. But somehow Pundarik became aware of the fact that the pujaris who were taking care of Jagannath didn't do that. And so he um, became a little preoccupied with that and criticized them, I think, in discussion with maybe Swarup Damodar. Um, but Swarup advised him that what you say may have some basis in truth or reality, but the fact of the matter is that Jagannath has been accepting this. He's not rejecting the service. And therefore, that should take precedence over the way we think it should be offered. Now, let me give you maybe another example of this kind of a thing. Sometimes it used to be that a new person would join an ashram, a temple, and then they would do something wrong in the service, and there would be devotees that criticized them for that. Mm-hmm. And they may have been right that the service should have been done in another way. Mm-hmm. But Bhavagrahi Janardana, it is said that Krishna accepts the spirit of the offering over the actual contents, ingredients, and procedure, which, with regard to the latter, might be not in accordance with precisely how it is said to be done. When you take on a scale, let's say on a spectrum, and you go from the beginning of religious life within Hinduism, or really universally, it would be kind of a varnashram conception of God, that I'm serving God because it will bring something to me. I've given an example before. When we were young in Vrindavan, the shopkeepers would sometimes keep a picture of Prabhupada in the shop, and we think, oh, they love Prabhupada, and so well, I'll buy there. Well, they love Prabhupada because if they put his picture up, people would buy there. And so their worship, if you will, of Prabhupada was not pure. I mean, in saying this, it's true what I'm saying, but it also brought them affection for Prabhupada. Prabhupada put food on their plate, fed their families, educated them, so to speak, by bringing funds to Vrindavan that would not have come there otherwise. And so while I'm critiquing them in one sense, their religious conception, I also want to add to that when Prabhupada departed from the world and we took him through the streets of Vrindavan on the palanquin, every man, woman, and child stood up and wept and saluted him, what he had done, for Vrindavan, and what kind of a sadhu he was. How much they understood exactly who he was and so forth is another thing. But they loved him, maybe for wrong reasons, but they loved him. We want to love. I've said this before. There are people who love Krishna or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or a sadhu for the wrong reasons, but they really love him, And then there are those of us who love them, Krishna, philosophically or theologically, or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu philosophically or theologically. We may criticize their love, but there needs to be a meeting of the two, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going off a little bit on a tangent, but it's worth mentioning and addressing. So the point, at any rate, is that on the spectrum, in Varnashram is like the beginning. So it's like, if you want to teach your children to be, you tell your children, say please, say please, say please. And then you give them a candy or a sweet, and then say thank you. So this is gratitude, right? Please, thank you. This is the beginning of love only, right? And they're going to learn to do it because they're going to get a reward for it. Ultimately, love should be without any consideration of reward. Giving itself is the getting, right? Giving is receiving. So on this religious spectrum, this Varnashram is like over here. It's kind of all rules based. And as much as there are rules, as much as love is absent. There may be some love there. If I live with you as a partner in a room, and I start to find out that you like to stay up late, listen to music, and you find that I like to get up early and chant Hare Krishna, we're like at odds. So we can make some rules and write them down and put them on the wall, and we can, navigate the course and bring some kind of communion, love to the picture, cooperation, and so on and so forth, based on the rules. But if we love one another, really, in a full sense, those rules go out the window, right? And your likes become mine, and my likes become yours. So there's no problem. So this is the other, obviously, end of the spectrum. In Rag Bhakti, there are no rules. There's only love. There are rules how to do Rag Bhakti, what is the method, and so on and so forth. But largely speaking, the love takes over. And Krishna is a Rag Margvedi, ultimately, in Vrindavan. He says, so Baba Grahi Janardana, that the spirit of the offering is what I accept. Sometimes we would, in the early days in Dwarka, we would, after the Mangal Arati, some of us who didn't have other services, we would gather again about maybe 6 a.m. in front of Prabhupada's Vyasasana and chant the Gurvastakam prayers of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And Prabhupada's room was not far from there, and he overheard us chanting, and we said, Vande Guru Shri Charanarindam. Instead of saying Guru, we were saying cow, Guru. That's how he heard it anyway. So he corrected us, but he was accepting the offering. Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj, about something like this, would say that Krishna hears that mispronunciation or incorrect, let's say pronunciation, and he says, I think you meant this, right? So he can feel the offering. It's a show. It's presented in a particular vehicle. The vehicle may be faulty, but the spirit is conveyed. So one has to take that into consideration. So a new person joins a temple, and they were always devoted to say, "Don't do it like this. Don't do it like that. You got to do it like this. You can't do it like that." And they go crazy, like. And a more senior devotee would say, "No, it's all right. It's all right. He's got his shoes on. Okay, it's all right. He could take them off. Put them over here. But like too many rules, too many would overburden the person. And the fact that he or she was sincere and it is what mattered. They wanted to do the right thing. They wanted to do it right. This is not an advocacy of, who cares about the rules? If you really love, you want to know how to do it right. Right? But just wanting to know how to do it right, even if you don't, the former is what counts. And that will be what's offered and acknowledged and accepted. So in this case, Swarup Damodar thought that Pundarika Vidyanidhi was a little over the top. Let it go, I mean, Jagannath's accepting the offering. So who are we to say? I understand what you're saying. It's a good point, but Jagannath's accepting it. So, and then in the night, of course, as you mentioned, as the text explains, Krishna and Balaram from the altar in the Jagannath temple came and told him the same thing. Don't criticize my pujaris. I'm accepting it like that. I like it like that. I like the starch or whatever, and then he was very pleased. Pundarika Vidyanidhi woke up and he went around everywhere and said, "Just see, Jagannath, Krishna and Balaram slapped me. Just see, my cheeks are red." And he was very, very, very happy to receive that. So it's something along those lines. We should be careful with our criticisms. Criticism should be constructive. There are criticisms in all modes of nature. So there are criticisms in the Tamagun where somebody criticizes just to criticize. Not good. Then there are criticisms in the mode of passion, where one criticizes another to make oneself feel better. I'm always criticizing others because it makes me feel better about myself. Not good either. And then there's constructive criticism in the Sattva-guna, right? It's constructive and detached. And then there's transcendental criticism, where the gopis are criticizing Krishna, or his friends are pushing him over and criticizing him for something that he's done. Not every devotee is in the position of being an instructor. The guru is the critic. The critic. He's a critical person. He has the very unsavory task of correcting and criticizing others. That's his or her unpleasant service, if you will. But it's a role and a service that a role must be played, a service that must be taken up by qualified persons. Nowadays, you could find anybody on the internet, one devotee criticizing. It's not at all appropriate. And so I think that there's some of that is part of the lesson of that chapter. Not to be overly critical, let it go, right? It'll work itself out. Neither is it my position necessarily. Now, obviously, this isn't an instruction that encompasses all circumstances and all situations and so forth. But by and large, it's best to be less critical rather than more, and leave the criticism to those who actually have the capacity to criticize and do it in at least in a sattvic sense of being offering constructive criticism for the benefit. If they have that, if I criticize it with that in mind, and that's my feeling, that feeling should come across then to a receptive and sincere soul. And so I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. Just one question: who was Pundarika Vidyanidhi in Krishna-lila then? Because I mean, it's funny that it's kind of like a reverse case of Gadadhara Pandit criticizing, at least mentally, Pundarika Vidyanidhi, because he was sitting on a palanquin and living in luxury, apparently.
One point I should mention with regard to I'll answer your question, with the Jagannatha temple, that some of you may not be aware of, that all of the pujaris are in the temple, they're all smart Brahmins from the Advaita Sampradaya. And Jagannath's accepting their offering. So, but aside from that, your question is about the transcendental position of Pundarika Vidyanidhi in Krishna-lila. He is the father of Radharani, Rishabhanu Maharaj. That's why Gadadhara Pandit was Radharani, became his follower. You could look at it like that. But yeah, Pundarika Vidyanidhi was criticized by Gadadhara Pandit, in Gadadhara Pandit's mind, and then he realized, he was wrong for that, and then he asked to make up for that by way of becoming his disciple. And here we find Pundarika Vidyanidhi is making a criticism. So, but it doesn't play out entirely like that. Now, therefore, he will become a disciple of the Pujari or something like that.
Yeah.
No. Okay, good.
Thank you very much.
What else?
So the next question is from Sri Lokanath Prabhu.
Sri Lokanath Prabhu, Jai.
Jai.
Oh, Sri Lokanath.
You need to unmute yourself, Sri Lokanath. Or is he frozen?
I think he froze up.
Oh, we'll come back.
This question.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I was muted there. I was just saying we'll come back to Sri Lokanath, and Ram Keli from Bulgaria is the next question.
Okay.
Okay, so Ram Keli, she sent this question. What is the role of the unconsciousness in Krishna consciousness? Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Well, you're using a psychological term when speaking about like the Freudian unconscious. And I don't know really how much it applies to Gaudiya Vaishnavism. I would say that the material world is the unconscious, subconscious, or unconsciousness of Krishna. So again, you're looking at a modern or even not so modern psychological term, or to be unconscious. That's you're talking about the unconscious, but to be unconscious obviously is the antithesis of Krishna consciousness. Matter is unconscious, we're conscious. Here I'm only talking about consciousness in terms of perception, which is only an aspect of consciousness as we are defining consciousness. So what is the role of I think that's what you're asking, the psychological unconscious. I'm not that familiar with what the unconscious is considered to be in psychological thought today. But we do, I would say this, that the chitta is one of the features of the antakarana, the subtle body, that perceives its awareness. Just like there's a sound, you become aware of it. That's chitta. Then with buddhi, which is the power of discrimination, intellect, you determine this is the kind of sound it is. It's a bell, ding, 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 or it's a flute. Okay. Chitta makes me aware of it. The buddhi makes me enables me to distinguish it from other sounds and define it. It's a flute sound. So we got chitta, we got buddhi, then we got manas. And manas decides, I like the sound or I don't like the sound. Sankalpa, vikalpa. This is what it makes this. This is the mind. The mind does this, I like this, I don't like this, this is hot, this is cold, this is good, this is bad. So that's its role. These are three aspects of the antakarna, which together with the ahankar, which is kind of the I maker, it means the identity that's formed by identification with matter. This makes up the subtle body. So if we look at the chitta, then there are impressions that are imprinted. These are, we call them samskars. Impressions from the world are imprinted on the chitta, and these impressions that are of a similar nature, the impressions are vrittis, and then enough of them of a similar nature, they form what's called samskars. So, they're both impressions, but you can understand the difference. A single impression, a group of impressions, and then that samskar turns into a vasana, or a psychological disposition to act in a certain way, and unconsciously, we are often just carrying out, being driven in our actions by these vasanas, which are derived from samskars and vrittis, and we're not conscious of the fact. We're on automatic. We're like a robot. There is will, the jiva has will, but it's often very much covered over by material nature and these samskars and vasanas, and we're just like functioning automatically. It's a very interesting idea, because now you have a very popular, of course, artificial intelligence, and all kind of thoughts about the prospects of artificial intelligence, and it can do so many things now. You can put people out of work with obviously with our artificial intelligence. You could probably have an AI program that could do better architecture than an architect who had to go to school for so many years, and so forth. What is the prospect of artificial intelligence? It can do everything. It can make music. It can do art. It can do math, and it can put everybody out of work. And there'll be only one thing left to do: chant Hare Krishna, which grows feeling. All right. This is an exercise of the heart, not of the tongue and the mouth and the ear. And of course, artificial intelligence is, well, it's artificial, and it's not driven by the feeling of a living being, but the feelings of a living being. The will of the jiva is different than the emotions that we experience, that are the likes and dislikes determined by manas, that aspect of the subtle body. So our sadhana, life is a sadhana, sadhaka.
We're happy.
Somebody's talking. Our life as a sadhaka is meant to bring out the self, uncover it from the material nature's influence. The fact that it is a doer, it has agency, becomes apparent. It's not clear whether it has agency. People think, well, they can't see the free will. Everything's going on automatically. In fact, look, we can do these things with artificial intelligence. Of course, somebody's doing them, but creating the artificial intelligence. But anyway, so this is a little different than what you're asking about, I think. But anyway, unconsciously, we're repeatedly doing things, repeating patterns of behavior, and so on and so forth. It's on automatic, and it's the unconscious that we have to overcome, if you will, become conscious of the fact that we're doing it unconsciously, and consciously do something about it. That's what Krishna consciousness is. So that's what comes to my mind with your question. Otherwise, the Freudian or Jungian, I don't know, unconscious. I'm not sure exactly what they meant by that and how that would apply. We're talking, kind of metaphysically. You have, like, take ego, like, for example, there's a metaphysical ego, and then there's a psychological ego. These things are misunderstood to be one. Therefore, you find some teachers, even of Western teachers of Eastern tradition, who want to do away with your ego, and then they make you do embarrassing things that if you didn't have an ego, you wouldn't do. Like, they have sex with your wife, and you're not supposed to, be troubled by it, because if you're troubled by it, it means it's your ego. Well, this is not very good at all. This is, in other words, to do away with the metaphysical, conventional ego of identifying with matter. You would be better off if you had a healthy psychological ego. If you used to assault the psychological ego, I mean, what some of these fellows do to people. That example I gave was one I'm familiar with, that a famous Western guru used to do. It shouldn't have even mentioned, but many other things as well, attacking the person's psychological ego and beating it up and so forth. I mean, you need a sattvic psychological ego, at least that's helpful, psychological ego, to then employ yourself, engage yourself in bhakti to uproot the metaphysical false ego, right? It's not just beating up your psychological ego. So anyway, I'm kind of off on a bit of a tangent there, but it's somewhat related. I hope it's helpful. Looks like Trilokanath's back with us. You want to ask a question now? You have to unmute yourself. I can see that there's a little microphone.
Dandabats Maharaj. I hope you can hear me, and forgive me, but our Zoom froze just at the critical moment.
Right.
So anyway, I hope and listening to your answer to the previous question, I'm not sure what the question was, but it seems a very similar kind of area. So stop me if you're going to be repeating yourself. So a little bit of context, very briefly. So how we know that the subtle body is superior to the gross body, higher, more subtle, and the soul is even more subtle. And at the time of death, the soul and the subtle body leave the gross body, and they call that death. And but the soul and the subtle body live on and transmigrate somewhere else. And so therefore, it's from that it's clear that the soul and the subtle body are independent from the gross body in this context. So often people tell me that thoughts are just a chemical reaction in the brain. And they also sometimes say that consciousness is also a chemical reaction in the brain, which is something I don't accept. But I can see how material scientists sort of try to reduce everything to having a physical cause, whereas our view is the opposite. So that's the context. But the question is, what is the relationship between the mind and the brain, and what is the function of the brain? So that's the question. I mean, there's plenty of discussion in our scriptures about the mind and the senses, but I personally have not seen much talk of the brain. But I know,
right? Yeah, I appreciate the question in the context. It's true that the dominant philosophical perspective in the world is materialism, or naturalism or physicalism, which says that that mind is nothing but the brain, and then they would conflate consciousness with mind as well. Whereas we distinguish not only the mind from brain, psychic matter from physical matter, we also distinguish the Atma, the self, from matter altogether, which is in a different. I mean, you could say there are different categories of matter, psychic and physical, and then there's consciousness, which is not a different category. It's not a category. What would you say? Category difference, but it's on a larger scale. It's in a different. It's different altogether, right? Consciousness. So that's our perspective. The mind, subtle matter, is consciousness-like. It's such a subtle form of matter that it has the ability to reflect, reflect consciousness, and then function in a quasi-conscious sense, and that the thoughts are generated and so on and so forth. Impulses of the world, its sights, its sounds, its tastes, and so forth, are filtered through the senses to the mind, and again, it makes these determinations. I like this, I don't like this. This is bad, this is good, this is bad, this is happy, this is sad, this is hot, this is cold, and that's you. You're hot, you're cold, you're happy, you're sad, you're good, you're bad. This is what differentiates you from someone else. So this is the material, conventional ego, the conventional material identity, and when we differentiate the senses from mind by referring to the former as physical matter and the latter as psychic matter, well, the same holds true for the brain. So the brain is physical matter. So it's like you might say it's like a glove, and the mind is like the hand. So it looks like the hand is dependent upon the glove. You could look at it like that, but you could look at the other way. The glove is dependent upon the hand, and through the glove, the hand is doing things that it couldn't otherwise. It could touch a thorn bush or something like that. So the brain, kind of the center in one sense, one of the center, the heart center would be another, but it's the brain center of the physical body. This is that in the entire body is like a vehicle to bring the identity that's formed in the subtle body, in the mind, closer to the gross things. So there's a hierarchy that there's sense objects, and then there are senses and sensors, and the brain would kind of be obvious. Yes, obviously in the classical texts, there's no mention of brain, right? There's senses, but it's part of the hardware, right, of the computer, if you will. So there's so gross sense objects, and there's senses, which means the physical body, which includes the brain. And then there's mind, which is the basis of feelings, emotions, likes and dislikes, happies and sads, goods and bads. All this is going on in the subtle body. It's all going on in the mind. If your mind is not in touch through the brain with the sense, when it touches the sense object, you're not going to experience it. You can go in the room and your eyes can pass over a picture, but if your mind is not connected to the brain, connected to the sense, you wouldn't see it. And you say, I didn't see it. So these things have to all line up for the experience, and the experience is in the subtle body itself. So mind is is experiential. The problem with it is that the experiences are all largely, well, in material life, entirely in relation to the physical. The thoughts are all about things. The thoughts are all about things. But the Gita tells us, of course, that we could reverse that. It can be the bandhu or it can be the ripur. It can be the friend or it can be the enemy. So with sadhana, the idea is you can train this mind. You can turn it away, thoughts away from things, and focus thoughts on that which actually gives experiential, quasi-experiential content or ability to the mind stuff. And that's yoga, right? And in the context of bhakti yoga, what happens, of course, is as bhava arises, it takes over the subtle body. Takes over the subtle body and the mind. And as it does, the physical body becomes spiritualized, because what's happening in the antakaran, the subtle body, determines what's happening in the physical body. Just like you said, when you get a subtle body, it takes you to the next physical body, right? So controlling the senses is accomplished by controlling the mind. And as the mind becomes overridden by bhava, then the body of the sadhaka becomes, as stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it becomes Chidananda. It becomes spiritualized. Prabhupada used to give the example of a golden plated box. The Siddha Deha, the spiritual meditative body, is gold, and the sadhaka Deha, overlaid, so to speak, with bhava, becomes like a gold-plated box. It functions for all intents and purposes. Similarly, it's only functioning, that is to say, for the purpose of the Lord. Not that it won't die, but it's only functioning for the purpose of Krishna. The senses are being used only for the pleasure of Krishna's senses. And this is how you see that. You say, well, I saw his body, it looked material to me. It got old, passed away too. How does it become spiritual? Well, what's the driving, motivating factor? How are the senses being used? When we use our senses for our own pleasure, we foster our own material identity. That's how it's created. Because I said, we have our likes, our dislikes, our goods, our bads. This is information fed to us from the sense objects through the senses to the mind, where those determinations are made. So yoga is about like cutting it off at the root, so to speak, right? So the gross body comes out of the subtle body. Brain comes out of the mind. So the brain is a particular instrument, right, within the physical body, where so many workings of the mind, they show up, right? They have the neurons, function a certain way. And you can look at the big argument, of course, is from our point of view, is that what's the term? Like correspondence does not equal causation. There's another word for it.
Correlation.
Correlation does not amount to causation. So there's a correlation between the brain and the mind. And we would say, of course, why not? There's a correlation between the glove and the hand, right? Yeah. So they see this. If I press the brain here, this happens. If I press the brain here, this happens. You start to feel like this. You start to feel like all these feelings are only coming from the brain, right? But there's a correlation between mind and brain. You could say there is, but they can't find the seat of actual feeling and experience in the brain. They can say, if I press here, this experience will stop, or somebody will go unconscious and so forth. But this is the big problem with materialism. People like to say, as you said, that it's just a chemical reaction in the brain, but it's so far from being proved that people are falling away in a scientific community every day from this attempt that's been going on for a century or so to reduce mind to the brain, right? And now we're finding, the scientists are finding that there's consciousness in species that don't have brains. The thought was the human brain is the most complex, combination of material ingredients, and it's so complex that these feelings can come out of it, right? Somehow or other. Whereas it was thought that only humans were conscious. Descartes thought only humans were conscious. Animals were just machines. I mean, so all this is changing because they're just up against a brick wall here. Feelings are not, consciousness is not reducible to the brain. Even mind is not reducible to the brain. But there's a correlation between mind and the brain. So if I have a thought, it's going to show up electronically in the brain in a certain way, right? So I don't know if I've answered your question entirely, but if you want to comment further on.
Yeah, that's a very satisfying answer, Maharaj. And I would say,
okay.
When they say the chemical reaction causes the thought, we might say the thought causes the chemical reaction. And the brain is a bit like a sense or a gateway between the mind and the senses. But very nice answer, Maharaj. My good wife, also Kandalata, also has a question for you.
Okay.
Kandalata Maharaj. Our Guru Maharaj is known as Srila Bhakti Rakshidhar Dev Goswami Maharaj. So sometimes I've noticed some devotees miss out the Dev, and I feel that's not giving proper honor. What can you describe? Talk about why we say that, why we call him like that.
I can't recall exactly the argument or when that came about. Sridhar Dev Goswami, and it's a good question, and I know there's a story to it. I'm sorry, please forgive me, I can't remember it at the moment. But whether it was coming from Govinda Maharaj or his disciples or other disciples to distinguish him in some way, but they, it became a point of his followers at the mob, to include that with a capital D, Sridhar Dev Goswami. Just another way of distinguishing him as a highly perfected, advanced spiritual person in general. But again, I can't remember the exact history of that. I used to know it, and I know it, but my brain isn't, or my mind is, which isn't, I'm not sure. It's not allowing me to recall it at the moment. I'll try to think a little bit more about that, and if I can, I'll answer it next week.
Okay, Maharaj.
Okay, Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj Jai.
So the next question is from Sevanidhi.
Okay.
Guru Maharaj,
yes.
I have a question regarding Arjuna. So I'm very fond of your classes, Ramananda Sambad series in Poland, and some years back, and I listened to them and reflected on this exploration you have there regarding Ramananda Raya's identity as Arjuna and the various opinions of our acharyas regarding this. So but I have not heard you mention that he also has been identified like Nara-Narayana in some cases. And I don't know where I heard this, so I wanted to ask about that. And then like another question, like is it because there is this like you bring up this point that like a jiva-tattva cannot have various sthayi-bhavas, but often I remember like you mentioned that Shiva is not a jiva, so he can have two sthayi-bhavas, like he can have sakyaras and he can be a madhuryaras both because he's Bhagavan. But in that sense, like if he's Nara-Narayana, wouldn't it be also possible to call Arjuna like VIshnu-tattva? Yeah, this question.
Well, I think that there are some statements in the Puranas where Krishna and Arjuna have been identified as Nara, Arjuna, person, human, and Narayan is God. So Krishna is Narayan, and Arjuna is Nara. There is a as human. There is a particular avatar named Nara-Narayana, right? Mentioned in the Bhagavatam as well as Krishna appearing as an aesthetic, and so some of the Puranas have extended that and said, here this Nara-Narayana avatar is appearing as Krishna and Arjuna. Krishna as Narayan, again, God, and Arjuna is Nara, and this combination between the human and the divine, and very charming form, if you will, of Nara-Narayana, much more than the Nara-Narayana official avatar, if you will. So I don't know if necessarily the statement should be taken to mean this is the Nara-Narayana avataring again or something like that, but more of just, you know, here is God and human, you know, in a transcendental loving union. So that's the first part of your question. And what was the other part?
Oh no, no, you can. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, so yeah, this part, and then what was the other part? Yeah, so like, isn't it possible then, like that he can, if he is?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Like
I see. You're asking about different sthayi-bhavas. Okay, so the sthayi-bhav is a self-defining emotion, spiritual emotion, like a friend, like a lover, like a parent, and so forth, right? Typically, each jiva has a sthayi-bhav, right? So a relationship with Krishna to be with God to be uncovered. He's by nature a servant of God, and that how he's to serve God, that's to be revealed. That's to become from unmanifest to manifest, and stepped into, so to speak, right? And that's one thing. But then we have a certain circle of Bhagawan's associates, like, for example, Krishna and Radha. So Radha's thought to be she's thought to be Swarup Shakti, Swarup Shakti, and not Jiva Shakti. Of course, when we speak about Jiva Shakti or Tatastha Shakti, we're speaking about an entity whose Shakti is Tatastha. It's an entity who has Shakti that's Tatastha, that's marginal, that it could be material energy, which is the power by which it does what it does. The Shakti means power, in which case the Jiva is only partially functioning as an active entity or with agency, causal efficacy. Because as we said earlier, material nature is actually moving the jiva around. It's doing all the movements. And the jiva doesn't know it. Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvas ahankara vinunat kartahomiti manite. He thinks I'm doing things, but are actually being done by material nature. Now, as I mentioned earlier, as the jivatma becomes free from the material covering and under the influence of bhakti, then its inherent quality, if you will, or characteristic of being a doer now comes to the fore. It's not just a partially a doer that's doing by way of activating material nature by being in touch with it. Like you turn on the TV, you're the doer, but the TV could take over your life and just sit there like a couch potato, right? That's kind of material existence. So then someone comes along and tries to pull you away from the chair, you got a life independent of that. You could be playing baseball instead of watching it on the television, and starts to pull him away. Then under the influence of that pulling, which is bhakti that's bestowed, then the capacity to be an actor, which is inherent, is manifest. So the Swarup Shakti is unmanifest, but it becomes manifest. But with regard to Radharani, sometimes she's explained that she is just not jiva tattva, but or jiva shakti, but Swarup Shakti. And then she has her expansions, gopis, and then Balarama expands as gopas, and some of the gopas have expansions and so forth. This is all the entourage of Krishna. So let's say, okay, Krishna, who is Krishna? Well, he's the son of Yasoda. So there's no Krishna without Yasoda. So the two are God. There's no Krishna without Radha. The two are God. So there's an entourage of associates that are let's say direct manifestations of his own internal energy. And then there's us who are jiva tattva, and we're influenced by Maya Shakti, and the Swarup Shakti is unmanifest within us, and it becomes manifest, and then we can function in similar roles within the Lila, right? So there's some difference between us, but amongst then those associates. So let's say Krishna is in Braj, right? And let's say he goes to Dwarka. So they all come with him. And there Radharani comes there in the form of Satyabhama. And Chandravali comes in the form of Rukmini. Sridham, Krishna's friend, who Krishna has to carry on his shoulders because he loses in a wrestling match to him, becomes Garuda. And he flies, and Krishna sits on his shoulders and flies around and so forth. So these personalities that constitute his immediate entourage, they're as powerful as Krishna. But the Lila Shakti defers to Krishna and lets him do all the wonderful things. They could any coward boy could defeat any demon. It would be just like, wouldn't even be a match. It's such a full expression of this Swarup Shakti, for example, in Sakyarasa, compared to some demon under the influence of Maya Shakti coming to cause a disturbance. But the Lila Shakti arranges for Krishna to do all the wonderful things, right? But the cowper boys could do. But they're still in wonder about him, about his beauty, his charm, and so on and so forth. I mean, Krishna doesn't know his own power because it doesn't have any limits. So how can he know it? He doesn't know the limits of his own power because there are no limits to his power. So these associates are in a similar kind of position, and they may appear. So Arjuna, we look at Arjuna in this way. He's like part of the entourage, the internal entourage of of Krishna for a particular lila. And so he can appear in different positions in different places. But this is not something that we think, well, I think I'll be a gopi and I'll be a coward boy at the same time. And maybe I'll also, whatever, be something else. I mean, this kind of thinking arises out of not being really very well acquainted with the tattva and what opportunity the sampradayas, what windows of opportunity they're affording us, and so for who the presiding deities of the sampradaya are, Gaur and Nityananda. What is their love, and why that is prominent in the sampradaya. And people are really attracted to the sampradaya for two reasons, because one of those two identities is what their own identity is constituted of, or the preaching and the outreach of Gaudiya Sampradaya is so broad and charming that it can bring in somebody who has the destiny in Vaikuntha, but that Vaikuntha Sampradaya is not canvassing widely enough to catch him up. So he gets caught up by the Chaitanya Sampradaya, the breadth of it, and then eventually he's transferred over. There's this story. This one devotee was frustrated with perhaps with ISKCON, and he left it, and he joined the Ramanuja Sampradaya. He got initiated in the Ramanuja Sampradaya, and he went to enter Sri Rangam, which is a temple in South India. It's the headquarters of the Sri Sampradaya, and they wouldn't let him in. He was like a Westerner, and some of these temples don't let Western people in, so they wouldn't let him in. He said, "No, I'm Hindu." No. Don't look, I got my paper. It shows I'm initiated in the Ramanuja Sampradaya. I'm a Hindu. And they said, no, can't come in. He said, then out of frustration, without thinking about it, on automatic, he said, Hare Krishna. They said, Hare Krishna, come on, Hare Krishna, you can come in. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he predicted that all of the sampradayas, Vaishnava sampradayas, would come under the banner of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's campaign. Now you may wonder, when is that going to happen? My argument is that it's already happened. And that is to say that Prabhupada built a bridge from India to the West, and that's hard work, what he did, to build that bridge. And then these other acharyas are walking across that bridge, and their traditions, the VIshnu-tattva, Dvaita, Shuddha Dvaita, and so forth, they become known in academia. They've got followers in the West and so forth. They would never have them were not only Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sampradaya, but our Parivar, our community within Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sampradaya. I mean, there was a time in academia that the only understanding of Hinduism and its ideal was Advaita Vedanta, that there were other forms of Vedanta. In fact, there are four. It's 4-1 against Shankar. 4-1, all devotional sampradayas. These were like unknown practically in academia. Prabhupada made a point to make it known. He had a group of devotees that were singled out to go to all the libraries and talk to professors and get his books put in all the libraries. This is Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Dharane, or Paschatya Pracha Dharane. It says, as William Marsh wrote. So they've all gotten life from our Sampradaya, from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sampradaya, and through Bhaktivinoda and his group, which we are all members of as well. So, so I guess I wandered a bit from the course, but that this is the thing. Our Sampradaya is deep and broad. So you have internal reasons for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's ascent, and the fact that he descended in a time that corresponds with the need to disseminate the Yuga Dharma, which is broad. The Yuga Dharma is to chant the holy name of God. It doesn't mean everybody who chants the holy name of God becomes a gopi or a gopa necessarily. I've been to temples in South India where the Hare Krishna mantra is chanted 24 hours a day. But they think of the name of Ram as Ramchandra. and it's universal, so it can be, that's fair. Yeah, and there are other ways to think about it also. Nam Shrestam ape Sachiputram Matra Swarupam. Nam Shrestam. This is Raghunatha said, well, we take the Hare Krishna mantra in a particular way, the highest way, as given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which leads to Braj Bhav. So Arjun Saka ki jai.
Jai.
Nara-Narayana ki jai. All right. Well, we just finished up on that point. I think there are probably maybe some other questions we can get to. I apologize for that, but
I have some follow-up questions.
Next week. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, next week. Okay, sounds good. Nice to be with all of you. Gaur Premanande Haribo Haribo.
Haribo.
Bhaktabinda ki jai.
Jai. Srila Guru Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
So yeah, so there's a few questions we didn't get to today, but we'll jump on them next week. So thanks for everyone for sending your questions, and have a great week, and we'll see you next